WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into baseball season. It's here. Wednesday, we are going to be at Costas in Dundalk giving these away, the Maryland Lottery Instant Scratch-Offs. We had a package of these up at Hollywood Casino up at the Barstool Sports Restaurant on Thursday for opening day as well. We're going to be at Costas from 2 until 5. It's also brought to you by our friends at Window Nation, 866-90Nation. I'll be wearing the bucket hat on Wednesday in Dundalk, celebrating 50 years of the Maryland Lottery, 52 years at Costas, and then on Friday, we're going to be at Fadley's in Lexington Market, the old Lexington Market, celebrating the opening of the new arena, Bruce Springsteen, the Eagles, and of course, the other opening day, the one where we do it here at home and we all get drunk and leave in the fifth inning and have a good time and see old friends and take selfies. Luke Jones will be with us on Thursday at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. He was also with the Orioles in spirit as they were at Fenway Park on a chilly day to start the season. Luke had a good time up at Hollywood Casino. One first thing I need to talk to you about is because you're not from around here, right? You're Pennsylvania. I took a picture, a selfie. I went over to Drug City in the morning because I was just in Dundalk and they got booze and it is what it is. Shout out to Brett Katzen. And the Drug City, the name Drug City apparently conjures up some not so positive thoughts for people who are not familiar with the east side of Baltimore. So George Fotis had his Drug City Orioles shirt on, and I took a selfie, and someone thought that they were calling our city Drug City. So I just want to make sure that when I give shout outs to Drug City and I wear, by the way, this is a pill. I thought it was Mr. Peanut, but George tells me it's a pill. That Drug City is not a purgative, thought. It's a magical place in Dundalk. And by the way, my daughter-in-law, her 33rd birthday is this weekend. She is celebrating at Drug City at the Fountain. So what's going on, man? Orioles 1-0. Adley Rutschman. Is he going to, how many times in a row is he going to get on base? 3 more on next, right? 3 at-bats he's getting on, right?
He certainly didn't waste any time reminding why, even in his rookie year, he was the most valuable Oriole last year. I voted for him. We talked about this. He made his debut, what was it, in late May? And there was, some early struggles. I think we all recall the first 3.5 weeks or so where he did scuffle a little bit and people were already starting to call him a bust. I remember people posing the question of should the Orioles send him down? And since then, he's been their best player, and he's been their best player by a pretty wide margin. And that's a compliment because this ball club has other good players, as we've seen over the last calendar year or so.
By the way, I think you said that 30 times last year between July and October. And we didn't talk a lot of baseball, but every time we talk baseball, you made sure that you were like, this guy's the real deal, and we all know he's the real deal. He's a 1-1. He looks like the real deal in every way. But then you get the hairs on the back of your neck when he leads off with a home run to start the season, and he can't stay off base, and the official scorers like him. And
yeah. Let's be honest. That 5 for 5 was very. That 5th hit. Come on now.
He reached base 6 times in a row. That's all I'm going to say.
He did. And that aside, what a terrific, historic opening day performance for Adley Rutschman. Had a chance to catch him on MLB Network. They have their MLB Central show, their morning show, and he joined them from Fenway Park. And you could just see, and it's a reminder of how young, how inexperienced some of these guys are, as much as they're rapidly becoming household names. I mean, Adley Rutschman's been in the big leagues for less than a year now.
It was his first opening day.
Yeah. He just had a smile on his face that you could just tell that.
We've been hearing his name for 5 years, so it's like he played last opening day, right? And the one before that, because once they get here, it feels like they're part of the furniture. It really does.
It does. It doesn't take long because baseball's that night in and night out sport, right? I mean, it's not once a week like it is in football. It's every day. So he really has, but I think what's so exciting, we talked about this, as you alluded to, we talked about this a lot over the last 2 months or so of last season, that, it was so inevitable that Rutschman was going to draw the comparisons to Matt Wieters. And we remember how hyped he was, from the moment he was drafted until making his debut, a little less than 2 years later. But with Wieters, there was always that sense of he didn't live up to the hype. And you're still talking about a multi-time All-Star that Matt Wieters was behind the plate, but he was not the next Johnny Bench. He was not Joe Mauer with power. He was merely a good catcher, but not a transcendent kind of ball
He
player.
was better than
What,
Earl Williams, and that's I'm going to say that
no doubt,
from a trade perspective of my father's expectations of Earl Williams.
no doubt. And to be clear, Matt Wieters was not the bust that some try to make him out to be. Again, he just didn't live up to the immense expectations. We all remember the website, Matt Wieters facts, and all the different stuff from 2009, 2010. But to see Adley Rutschman come up, and again, after those first 3 weeks or so last year, he was everything as advertised. And look, we'll see ultimately where his career goes in terms of, not just being second in Rookie of the Year last year, but how quickly he becomes, in my mind, best catcher in the American League. He might already be that, but certainly he's got to go out there and do it. He's got to do it consistently. And also, when you look at his entire skill set from the defense, the plate discipline, ability to draw walks, the power that he shows, especially with the doubles last year. We'll see if those doubles, a few more of those turn into home runs in his first full season in the major leagues. But this is the kind of guy that can be an MVP candidate if he continues to ascend and if he stays healthy, and if the Orioles find that right balance between giving him enough days off behind the plate, but also wanting to keep his bat in the lineup. That's why I thought, all the talk during the spring about backup first base was kind of silly to me. Well, put Adley Rutschman there for a day, every once in a while if you want to get Mountcastle off first base. So, you have a chance to really see something special with him. And for him to be the face of this rebuild, as you mentioned, I mean, he was drafted in 2019. That was 4 years ago at this point. So he is a household name, but to see him live up to the hype and to do it on opening day, there's always that extra symbolic feeling of doing it on opening day. We know it's one of 162, but for him to do it on opening day at Fenway Park, as cold as it was and all the other elements at work in that ball game, it's pretty special. And getting a chance to watch this guy already, you really you understand certainly why he had been talked about as the first overall pick in the draft for a couple years leading up to that 2019 draft.
Well, we got a football draft here in a couple of weeks, and the football draft and the baseball draft very, very differently for historically. I mean, for all of the Mark Smiths and all of the Jeffrey Hammonds, and I mean, I've been doing this 31 years. When guys work out, we've been waiting for that player. Machado was that player,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, Matt Wieters on the cusp of that player. Markakis, really nice player. I'm just thinking of other, but I mean, there are more first round busts if you go through the Orioles' last 40 years of guys who didn't make it here, didn't make it anywhere, barely made it anywhere. The Brian Taylor collection, right? The Todd Van Poppel collection. At any point this can happen. But when they stink as bad as they stunk, and they were following this Astro thing, except for the cheating and the trash can banging, of course. But when you stink this much, and I saw them bragging about having won once, okay, but then what are they John Ogden and Ray Lewis, or are they Travis Taylor and Mark Clayton? To use to mix our sports up here, and for Rutschman to be this good this quickly, I'm worried about their pitching. I mean, look, I don't want to throw a wet blanket up, but they almost lost the game.
Sure.
I mean, like that almost happened. It's one game. It is what it is, but it certainly would have smelled better had they won 11-4.
Yeah, no question about that. And certainly we can get into it. And look, I would say this. You look at a 10-9 ball game and you say, wow, they didn't pitch well. I don't think the pitching was as bad as 9 runs allowed would indicate. I think it was their defense was an issue, and specifically their outfield defense. I think that hurt Kyle Gibson in his final inning, where Boston added a couple more runs and made his final line look not so good. Certainly that was an issue. Later in the game, Santander misplaying a couple balls. I get why Brandon Hyde, and lots of teams do this, flipped Santander and Hayes, knowing how expansive the right field is at Fenway. But you do run the risk in that situation that you have outfielders who are looking at the ball off the bat from a different angle if you're going from left field to right field and vice versa. So, so that was at work a little bit. But yeah, there are questions about this ball club. There's no question. And I wrote on a couple occasions, even here recently at BaltimorePositive.com, especially with Dylan Tate being on the IL to start the year, dealing with the elbow issue. I mean, he's on the mend. He's throwing, has started bullpens, but he's not going to be back until probably sometime in May, and that's the best case scenario right now. And you have Michael Givens, who came up with a sore knee at the end of spring training. So you have those two on the IL, and I mean, you can make an argument, not to say that CNL Perez and Baker wouldn't be mixed in there a little bit more, but you can make an argument. Those are your seventh and eighth inning guys to bridge the gap to Bautista. And if you recall, as fun as the end of last season was, from the moment that they traded away Jorge Lopez, okay, Bautista stepped into the ninth and did a phenomenal job, but they did have some issues bridging the gap from starter to closer with some of, Joey Crable struggled down the stretch. Some other guys weren't quite as effective as they had been earlier in the season. So the bullpen is a concern of mine, especially with Tate and Givens being sidelined right now. So wasn't encouraging to see Baker struggle the way he did. I did think it was encouraging to see Logan Gillespie come in and get the strikeout that he did. That was in a big spot, for a guy who pitched some last year, but certainly didn't pitch in many high leverage situations for them. So, that's definitely a question mark. The starting rotation, while certainly Gibson, and we're going to see Cole Irvin in the finale of this series at Fenway, elevates their floor because they are innings eater type starting pitchers. They're still looking at Dean Kramer and Kyle Bradish. And whenever Grayson Rodriguez does arrive, as we found out he would be optioned to start the year. And people talk about service time there. He's struggled too. He had some struggles in the spring. And keep in mind, he missed 3 months last year with an injury. So I didn't have nearly the negative reaction to that. But my overall point is,
well, you all want to see the savior, right? I mean,
no,
we all want to see that, but then the kid comes up and has an 80 ERA and gets his head beaten in, and then we're like, oh, we effed him up the way we did Arrieta.
Yeah,
or,
I mean,
or any long line of other pitchers, right?
Yeah, and not even just an Orioles thing, but when you are talking about a young pitcher who went through what Rodriguez did last year, I mean, when he got hurt, he injured his lat on, I think, was June 1st. At his start at Norfolk.
He would have been pitching here by the All-Star break, right?
Oh, it was going to be before that. I think it was going to be within 2 or 3 weeks you were going to see him. It was going to be sometime in June. I know a few different people who had said that. There was nothing official, but he missed 3 months then. And when he came back in early September, he did pitch. He had a handful of outings at the minor league level, a couple rehab starts, and then he finished at Norfolk. He wasn't quite as sharp, wasn't quite as precise and dominant as we had seen him be before the injury. So
it's got to be devastating to a young man to be that close.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Just psychologically, I'm just thinking about being that age, being on that beat, knowing what those guys go through. That's the one thing, being around the guys, I have incredible respect for what it takes to get there, and for a guy like Gibson, even to be kind of just okay, the sinker ball thing, the Scott Erickson sort of 30 years later, the notion that this guy's been doing it 15, I mean, I'm impressed by any guy that can keep himself healthy enough to do this into his mid-30s, pitching-wise.
Oh, no doubt. And that's why the Orioles, that's why they valued him. That's why they brought Kyle Gibson in to essentially be, and I don't think it's a dramatic upgrade on paper. And all, he was signed to replace Jordan Lyles. What Lyles did for them, and the Orioles feel that he might be slightly better than that. So we'll see how it plays out. And they added Cole Irvin, who logged a lot of innings for the A's the last couple years. So, but you're still counting on those young guys. I mean, so much about this ball club, and we talked about this last year in terms of how they overachieved. Expectations are higher now, and that's a good thing. But you're still counting on a lot of young guys to not just match what they did last year, but to see if they can take the next step. And that's the big question that I have with some of these bullpen arms, guys that really came out of nowhere last year. And not even so much Bautista, his ninth inning struggles aside. I mean, he was so good, so dominant last year. But again, how do you get to him? Certainly with the starting rotation, do you have enough upside? And, does Dean Kramer match what he did a year ago? Can Kyle Bradish match what he did in the second half last season? When does Grayson Rodriguez get here? When does DL Hall get here? So, oh yeah, John Means, who a July return, I think is where the target is. And he's throwing bullpens at this point. So, there's upside to be had as the year goes on, as it pertains to the pitching. But yeah, as we saw on Thursday, on opening day with what was a very comfortable lead, that, as we should always remember, at Fenway Park, there's no such thing as a truly comfortable lead.
My dad told me that. Your dad told you that. And I told everybody at the bar that when it was 9-5 3 or whatever it was.
No doubt. And especially if you're going to kick the ball around a little bit, as the Orioles did, which I don't think that's something that's going to be part of their MO because they defended very well last year and they have really good defensive players. But yeah, if Jorge Mateo is going to make a bad throw on what should be a double play ball to wrap it up, yeah, you're gonna be nervous about that. So yeah, we'll see how the rest of the series plays out. And whenever you win the opener, it's always great, right? You got a chance to win the series if you win one of the next two. But certainly the story of the day on Thursday was Adley Rutschman at the plate. And let's also make mention of the walks that the Orioles drew at the plate. Lots of good at bats. Even if you want to say lousy pitching from the Red Sox, Orioles work counts. And also, we saw quite a few stolen bases, which one of the rule changes that we haven't talked about quite as much. I mean, so much has been on the pitch clock and the elimination of the shift, but bigger bases. And when you can consider and you say, okay, well, it's just a few inches, right? Between the bases when you have bigger bases. In baseball, a few inches, that's a lot. So
Game of inches.
Especially when you have Jorge Mateo and Cedric Mullins potentially stealing bases for you. So it'll be interesting to see how that part of it plays out.
But they ran the bases like the Bad News Bears. I mean, they really did. It was insane.
Well, I'm talking about the stolen bases, but
I'm talking about not holding guys on. I'm talking about the Red Sox. What the hell was that?
Yeah, no question. I mean, you could talk about the catcher, and certainly his name came up a few times, but whether you're not holding runners or not blocking balls in the dirt, whatever it is, yeah, that was bad.
Or as I said out loud, we ain't Winter Haven anymore, son. You got to hold them. I mean, like but working at the kinks in the beginning of the year, I'll just say this: I'm an old schooler. You know this. Were you at the Hoosier Daddy Pedro Martinez game?
You talking what, the 04? Was that the 04 opener?
Yeah.
I was not. I
Sunday night baseball, Hoosier Daddy, all Orioles fans. It was cold as hell. Martinez got shook. I mean, that to me was pinnacle Oriole magic period of time because it was still the halo in 96 and 97 still there. They still had all of these great players, the Red Sox, the Yankees, the rivalry, Clemens, Jeter, all that stuff was baking, Schilling, all of that. But 20 years later, like Red Sox, Orioles, and to think of where these franchises have been and whatever the heat is on opening day, I thought to myself, yeah, Orioles got even now. I mean, it does work in cycles. Eventually, we stink bad enough to get Adley Rutschman. You know what I mean? Like, literally, and now they have to cash in. That's all I could think about on opening day is I'm like, oh, my God, they may have one of the best players in baseball. They may have a couple of them. I hope we're not where we are with Lamar Jackson 5 years from now, where this creep who owns the baseball team, who ran off the lock and four and the guys over at the Fan and lied to them. I mean, dude, that guy's lost. I mean, he's lost. And the management of this team, I saw they even had TJ Brightman running around on BAL. I mean, the game's on Masson too. Bars can't even find the game sometimes. Different packages, all sorts of things that go into baseball. Mm-hmm. They have this bright, shining light in a struggling city. I was downtown the other day. Downtown still feels like it needs work. It needs people. It needs love. It needs all of that. And we're going to have opening day next week. CFG Bank. I'm doing the show down at Fagley's. We'll be down there. Like, this is such a golden opportunity. You know what I mean? Seeing the Red Sox stink on a cold day, seeing them put up a washed up 2-time Cy Young Award winner who can't find home plate and he's 85 pitches deep in the 4th inning. Like, I see this and I'm like, they got a chance to like be relevant. People hate the football team. They're mad at the owner. They're mad at Eric. They're mad at John. They're mad at Lamar. They're mad at me. They're mad at you. The baseball team has everyone's focus. The Ravens aren't going to throw a football until the Orioles are either well into a pennant race, into the playoffs. What's going to happen between now and September 10th when the Ravens play football for this baseball team? They have the stage. They have a canvas. They've had a canvas for 30 years with this family. And then I see this creep sitting next to Mike Elias. They all have headsets on. They're doing the game, but they're not doing the game. Then he does the post game. He's lying about opening books, pissing on the Baltimore Sun. Like it's just such a, what is he doing? It's opening day. Adley Rutschman 6 for 6. He's a clown. He is a clown. That much is clear from, and I don't need to know him. I mean, I'm watching it
Mhm.
from afar and I'm thinking, you're wondering who's giving Lamar Jackson advice? Who's giving John Angelos advice? Who's he listening to?
Yeah, I mean, I just look, let's be very clear about this. He's the one who offered. He's the one who initiated talk of opening the books. We talk about
He
this with all,
attacked Dan Connolly, who
right, right.
hasn't done anything to them
But,
except cover shitty baseball for 2 decades.
but we talk about this with so many different ownership groups and so many different markets, right? In multiple sports, opening books and the lack of that happening, except for the rare occasion where you're talking about a team that's publicly owned.
The
But
Braves have to do it.
right.
Packers have to
We
do
talked
it.
about with the Packers, right? But again, so it isn't that he won't do it. It's that he said he would do it, and he said it multiple times now, and he still then doesn't deliver. So
He
it
is
really is,
such a small, born on third, thinks he hit a
yeah.
triple human. I mean,
It's
and it's
just
so obvious. Like the fact that he doesn't talk to me, fine. Lots of people don't like me. I appreciate that you like me, Luke, and all you listeners like me. But like the fact that you can't sit man to man and sit down and have a conversation with me after 30 years, shame on you. I mean, I like it's not changing my life to listen to him lie to Jason La Canfora, other than to say, Jason, you're a journalist. Are you going to push back on this creep?
yeah.
I mean, seriously, you're doing this publicly, Jay. I mean, don't let him lie. You're the only one he talks to. Nobody else is getting a crack at him, so don't let him bullshit you. You're supposed to be a journalist, Mr. Washington Post guy, Mr. Baltimore. Like, somebody should hold these people accountable. Meanwhile, Bashotti's off running somewhere.
Yeah.
It is weird that the baseball owner's talking and the football owner's running and the football team's under siege and the baseball team's undefeated with this phenom. It's weird. It's dogs and cats, dude. That's all that came to my mind as I'm sitting in Hollywood Casino watching John Angelo sit down there and do the Papa wave like he owns the team, because he does own the team now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said just a couple minutes ago. When you look at where the Ravens are, and look, not even getting into who's at fault, who's mad at whom, who's the most responsible. There's a lot of frustration, right? Even if you are very balanced and measured and you understand how complicated this contract situation has been with Lamar Jackson and the ramifications it has for the salary cap, for their roster building. If
And
you're a
I'm not
fan,
convinced if they sign him and have Kumbaya that they're really going to win the Super Bowl. I'm not
well,
convinced he's winning a Super Bowl with this franchise. So now I don't
but
know that they are. So
but that
even if he's in, you got to say, can we really win? Maybe, maybe.
I, that's a discussion for another day. But the point is, there is a very unusual level of frustration as it pertains to the Baltimore Ravens, as we've seen for the better part of the last 2 decades, right? Because they've been as successful as they've been. We know the NFL is king, not just in Baltimore, but every market that has an NFL team. That's just how it is, right? I mean, the NFL, look at the ratings for anything the NFL does compared to anything any other pro sport does. But with that being acknowledged, the frustration, the lack of activity in the offseason for the Ravens, I mean, they've added one player outside the organization now 2+ weeks into the new league year. It's a very unusual set of circumstances for the Ravens. This is such a golden opportunity for the Orioles to really gain some traction here. And no one's saying the Orioles are going to overtake the Ravens. And I hate this idea that that you can't be
I grew up
excited and
Colts and
watch more.
Orioles. I was equal. I
Right,
love
right.
them both.
Exactly, exactly. But my point is, let's face it, and we've seen it through attendance, ratings, whatever you want to talk about. There hasn't been a lot of juice for Orioles baseball since the end of the Buck Showalter era. That's stating the obvious, right? And that's been by design. They were that bad, and then they didn't try to get any better at the major league level for a few years in a row. So now you do have this team coming off of a 31 game improvement in 2022, which was a lot of fun, but still not a lot of people were really paying that close attention. So now you go into a new season, you have the Ravens in this very odd position. This is such a golden opportunity for the Orioles to really gain some traction, really generate some buzz, really generate some enthusiasm. Adley Rutschman goes 5 for 5 on opening day. They win. They have a chance to to win their opening series and win a couple series and come back home for next week's home opener. And then you have John Angelos just throwing cold water all over this, and no one told him to go on and and start pushing back at the Baltimore Sun. He's the one who on two different occasions talked about once opening the books, and then when he had his interview in Sarasota, talked about maybe not opening the books, but at least a business presentation. And then that's the message you deliver on the heels of winning on
The
opening
amazing
day.
thing is pissing on the Baltimore Sun in this town. It's like, he doesn't live here, because the Baltimore Sun's barely like an entity anymore in the way that it once was to be worthy of yelling at them after he took the sign down off the scoreboard, which freaked people out, old people, I guess. But like, the Baltimore Sun has not had their ass at all. If the talk about me, I'm the one who's held them accountable. The Baltimore Sun has not held the Baltimore Orioles accountable. Who? What? Peter Schmuck? He's been gone 5 years. Like, who is written? He thinks Dan Connolly works at the Sun. Like, it just blows my mind how sheltered these billionaires are, and how out to lunch they are, and how our fans, our listeners, all live here, work here, support local, buy crab cakes local, go to Drug City for more than just the drugs. And these guys don't even live here, and they get like a hall. How does Bisciotti have a hall pass for not talking to people? How and throwing people like me out? How does he just get a hall pass? And meanwhile, Junior is now running the Orioles and popping off on opening day and sitting behind home plate, and Daddy's not there to say sit down, and never will be again. So we're into a new world where, John's going to be a public figure. Apparently.
Yeah.
And for me, with John, there's no better time for them to do it if you're doing it right. But if you're going to step out in front of the team and prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that you're a jackass, which he's done, to your point, on multiple occasions, that's not good either. I'm not saying the owner needs to be out in front of it at all. I'm saying the owner once or twice a year needs to show up, do a Papa wave, show up around town at a couple of key charity events, and look like he's engaged, as opposed to flying in a private jet, getting police escort, walking onto the field in the jeans, and then back on his yacht at 6 p.m. in Bimini. Like, we've come a long way here. We really have. Like, I've been doing this 30 years and seeing the moving parts and seeing the opening for the Orioles on opening day. It's sitting there for the franchise. I just hope they're making better decisions than some of the decisions I saw the owner making on opening day, which is lying to the fan, lying to the fans, brushing off journalists. I've already been thrown out 17 years. I apply for my press credential, they'll let you in, not me in. What does that say about them? I mean, they need to sell tickets. They need to create enthusiasm. They have good players. They have some great players. This is an opportunity for them. I hope they don't F it up. I really do.
Yeah, no question about it. And I mean, even how about being wishy-washy about, when the topic of an extension for an Adley Rutschman or a Gunnar Henderson is broached, leaning back on this small market crutch, which, by the way, Tampa and some of these teams that are small market, they've extended young players. Wander Franco got a huge extension from the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, whether he plays there his entire career, that's another point, but they extended him. So the one comment I thought was really rich that hasn't necessarily gotten quite as much attention was we should be judged on our win-loss record. It's like, wait a second here. Okay, now, not saying Mike Elias, and technically John Angelos was not in charge as far as the Angelos family's entire tenure as ownership. But if we're going to really go there, so Peter Angelos,
I have judged them on their record. It's trash. It's garbage.
Well, let's just do this very simple exercise here. And as we wake up in the wee hours after opening day, it's not mentally taxing to do this. Since Peter Angelos bought the team in late 1993, how many winning seasons have the Orioles had? 1994, 1996, 1997, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2016, and then last season.
That's 8. I count 8.
8 in 30 years.
I've been on the air 31 years. Yeah. That's a lot of bad. Like I said, Dan Connolly's watched a lot of bad baseball. So is Luke Jones. So is Nestor Aparicio. So is everybody.
Right. So now, as we bring it to the present, if you want to talk about this current era and this Mike Elias era, then fine. I'll hear that. 83 and 79 last year, 31 game improvement. Great. Excellent. That's a good start. But that is not the expectation. That is not the culmination of anything there. The idea is not to just be decent enough that you're kind of hanging around to be the third wild card. So the point is, this franchise still has a lot of work to do, even on the field, let alone talking about what you're alluding to. So much work off the field to do. So again, the message delivered on the heels of so much excitement, and there is genuine excitement about this club and the young players led by Adley Rutschman, but to deliver that kind of message, boy, I'm not saying it turns people off entirely, because ultimately it's still about what happens on the field. But if you want to maximize that, if you want to maximize that juice, that energy, that buzz for the Orioles, and there's a genuine great chance to do that. If this team starts, on the heels of what we've seen with the Ravens in the offseason and this Lamar impasse that looks like it has no end in sight as things stand at the end of March, maybe we'll see something change as we get to the draft and after that. But at this point, I'm not counting on it. I mean, if the Ravens can, or if the Orioles can start off, they get off to a 14 and 7 start, which isn't extraordinary, but it's very good. Boy, you're talking about people being excited and probably having an ability to selling some more tickets as you're getting into May and June and the summer months and all that. So there is a great opportunity for the Orioles. But to your point, are they going to be able to maximize that from a strategic business standpoint? And that's where I think anyone who's paid attention for a long, long time around here certainly have their doubts.
He is Luke Jones. We will continue to monitor all things Angelos and Bisciotti. I'll be the guy paying attention to what the owners are doing. I'll be writing some columnists next week on that. We're doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour, and I'm excited about it. We got out a little bit over the weekend. I'm going to be at Drug City on Saturday. Over the weekend, we did Hollywood Casino and Barstool Sports. We're going to be doing that. They have bands coming up there, Doc Martin, Eclipse, a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to be giving these away, the old schooler instant lottery scratch-off tickets on Wednesday at Costas in Dundalk. We're kicking off 50 years of the Maryland Lottery and the 50th anniversary tour. And then on Friday, we're going to be at Fadley celebrating the opening of CFG Bank. And Springsteen, the Eagles, opening day. Man, it's a good thing I'm not 24 anymore. My liver would be able to take a weekend like this. But it's going to be a big week around here as spring is sprung, and hope springs eternal for the Orioles. And, I don't know what the hell's going on with Lamar Jackson. We'll worry about that later. Our friends at Window Nation have an April deal as well, 866-90-NATION. We'll be talking about them on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. Now, I put together some more dates. On the 13th of April, on Thursday, we're going to be at Pappas in Bel Air. So I stopped up there. I saw the bar, said hello to some old friends up there. We'll be there 2 weeks from now. Then on the 27th, Thursday the 27th, we're going to be at Captain Larry's, which is a great corner bar down in Federal Hill. It's Chris Pike's favorite place, his neighborhood place. We're going to be having their crab cake during the month of April. And I'm stalking out all sorts of places, man. I got the McFalls people working on a crab cake tour in May. I'll be heading around I have another vegan crab cake happening in May as well. Don't frown. It's better than it sounds. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Little baseball, little football, little Baltimore positive. Stay with us.